Kia ora, welcome to Parliament TV. Over the next hour, we present items from the TVNZ collection, from archives held by Ngā Taonga Sound and Vision, to remember the politics from our past.
One of the most controversial political battles fought in New Zealand during the 1970s and 80s was over sporting contacts with apartheid South Africa. In 1977, New Zealand, along with all other Commonwealth countries, signed the Gleneagles Agreement. This promised to discourage sporting contacts with South Africa.
The apartheid system was ended through a series of negotiations between 1990 and 1993. The All Blacks rugby team was scheduled to visit South Africa in 1992. In 1991, the Frontline program travelled to the country to see what progress was being made.
Good evening, welcome to a new year of Frontline. Tonight we visit the new South Africa. For decades, New Zealanders have been literally fighting in the streets over whether or not we should be playing sport against the racially selected teams of South Africa. But now rapid changes are taking place. The edifice of apartheid is being stripped down with major political and social reforms. Nowhere is this more evident than on the sports fields. This weekend, an Olympic delegation is in the Republic evaluating the changes, and if they like what they see, the South Africans could be competing at Barcelona next year. Next week, South Africa's new non-racial soccer association will apply for membership of the sports world governing body FIFA, paving the way for a return to international competition in that sport. But what about rugby? The All Blacks are scheduled to tour South Africa next year. Will they go? Are the changes taking place in that sport enough to justify resuming competition with the Springboks? Frontline journalists Rod Vaughan and Carol Hirschfeld have been in South Africa this month assessing the developments. Here's their report.
Let's go! Full speed! Lean forward! Lean forward! Hands under! 11! Lean forward! Right! Hands underneath! Hands underneath! That's him! Come back! Come back! Come back! There he comes! Hands underneath! That's good!
It's been a bitter and bloody debate, pitting New Zealander against New Zealander. All because of a game called rugby. And whether New Zealand should play against a country that has racially selected teams. It's been 15 years since the All Blacks last stepped foot in South Africa. 15 long years punctuated by the Springbok riots of 1981 and the rebel tour by the Cavaliers 5 years later. Now the All Blacks are poised to return, thanks to the imminent amalgamation of the white South African Rugby Board and the black South African Rugby Union. The All Blacks will arrive in the midst of huge political and social upheaval. Apartheid is being dismantled. 40 years of oppressive legislation removed from the statute books. For 30 million non-white South Africans, this means no longer being aliens in their own country. While the changes are welcomed by some of the white minority, others need persuading.
It's time. Time for all South Africans to put peace first. In the new South Africa.
In the new South Africa we visited, the barriers are already starting to fall. People of all races are rubbing shoulders, albeit tentatively, in almost every corner of society. The rules of the game have changed now, allowing blacks to meet whites on equal terms. Gone are the infamous Group Areas Land and Property Acts. For the first time, black South Africans can own property and live where they wish. Wealthy blacks are now buying into upmarket white suburbs, and they're paying anywhere from $250,000 to $1 million for the privilege. This $500,000 property in Johannesburg was recently inspected by officials of the once outlawed African National Congress. They're looking for a new home for ANC President Oliver Tambo. He's tipped to step down from the presidency shortly and needs a retirement home. Non-whites are also making their mark in the business community, and many are reaping quite substantial rewards. Vino Nankin has set up one of the first non-white real estate agencies in the country. She says many non-whites are eager to move into white areas, but first they need reassuring.
These fears are that can they adjust to these environments? Are there amenities that they can go to? Will they be comfortable in this kind of in this white environment? Would people make them feel comfortable?
Is there very much overt hostility towards black South Africans moving into the two white suburbs?
Hostility would be a little strong. I would say maybe adjustment. They need the adjustment. In a lot of cases, the very right-wing people, the people that are really conservative, feel they can't make that adjustment right now. And they need the time probably to make it. And in time, they probably would make the adjustment.
Perhaps nowhere is integration of white and non-white more apparent than in sports such as cricket. This is the Wanderers Club in Johannesburg, bastion of white sport. 3 years ago, it opened its doors to youngsters from the black townships. Townships which have recently been the scene of bloody clashes between rival factions. These youths may not have all the trappings of their white teammates, but there's no doubting their skill on the cricket field. It's a game which is becoming increasingly popular among non-whites. And that's largely thanks to Dr. Ali Barker, a leading cricket administrator. He canned Mike Gatting's rebel cricket tour of South Africa last year.
There's been a massive drive since 1986 with the youth of the country in the townships. I think cricket's a long-term educational process and you can't create a champion overnight. So I think we've got to be a bit patient. We're preparing for the future. We're preparing for that time when on merit the South African cricket team will represent all population groups, and if I had to give a guideline, I would think in about 5 to 10 years' time. The unification process in cricket is irreversible, and we anticipate by the end of June that there will be one controlling body of cricket, non-racial, that will look after all cricketers in this country.
Now rugby is charting a similar course. Consider the Currie Cup, white South Africa's equivalent of the Ranfurly Shield. It's dominated by white players. Non-whites only occasionally have a look in, but that's about to change. Talks have just been held between Dani Craven of the white-dominated South African Rugby Board and Ibrahim Patel of the non-white South African Rugby Union. Talks which were chaired by former ANC exile Steve Wetere. Now the two organisations are going to amalgamate. They'll form a single body called the South African Rugby Football Union. It's something for which both parties are keen to take the credit.
It vindicates the position of the South African Rugby Union, who over a very, very long period had fought vigorously to have apartheid abolished from sport, or from rugby in particular. And secondly, its absolute demand for rugby to be played on true non-racial lines.
We opened up in rugby, we opened up hotels which were closed, we opened up the airways, we opened up everything. We, the rugby people, when it was against the law. And if it wasn't for rugby, the other sports wouldn't have had anything. They just followed suit. But I had to bear the brunt of all the insults I got from the government. I was chased out of offices. I was insulted, but I had to take it for the sake of a cause. And now they're on the bandwagon, and I walk behind the wagon in dust. I don't care. As long as the caravan moves, and that is what is happening here in this country.
But just how far and how fast the caravan moves along the road to integration is another question. And on it hinges the fate of 35 million white and non-white South Africans. It's a wet Monday night at the University of Witwatersrand Rugby Ground in Johannesburg. Transvaal A and Transvaal B are battling it out in the first trials of the season. Making a bid to be reselected as Transvaal's fullback is number 15, Martin Knutzer, seen here tearing away for a try. Rugby in South Africa have been very kind to him, and being white has helped. Off the field, Martin Knertzer works in downtown Johannesburg as an insurance consultant. It pays well, around $45,000 a year, and that's topped up with money he gets from his other profession, rugby. When he turns out for Transvaal, he's paid about $400. He gets $166 when he plays for his club. All this on top of his travel and accommodation expenses. Last season, roughly, how much money do you think you made from playing at club and at provincial level?
About between 15 and 20,000.
Between 15 to 20,000 rands. That's quite a tidy sum of money, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but it's taking lots of our time to go to practice and matches. I think we earn that money. I think the big players earns about 80,000. Like I think the big players, Springboks for sponsorship, speeches is about 1,000 to 1,500 rand for one speech at a school or a clinic.
You have ambitions like that?
Yeah, I'd love to make some money. It would be nice.
So 27-year-old Martin Knertzer effectively has two incomes, allowing him to rent a smart townhouse while looking around for a larger place to buy. And adding to his financial security is the income his wife Tracy receives as a pharmacist. It's a comfortable lifestyle, both at home and at the rugby ground. There he and his white teammates get 5-star service. A massage should they need it, a check-up from the doctor, a bit of tender loving care for old war wounds, and a well-appointed dressing room. Which means there's little excuse for them not playing well, especially when they've had the benefit of regular coaching clinics. Making all this possible, of course, is money. Lots of it. Well over $1 million a year is pumped into white rugby by two major sponsors, a bank and a brewery. The question now is, will non-whites enjoy the same benefits when integration takes place? In theory, they will, but it's going to take time and a firm commitment from whites to redress the situation. Already, the signs are there.
I think it's a good move for the two unions to come together for South Africa, to be one unity. It will be good for South Africa rugby in the future. 2 weeks ago, I played with the SA Barbarian team, and there was 6 blacks, 2 coloured and 4 blacks in the team. That's the way the things are going now in South Africa.
But the reality is, I guess, that for most of them, it's going to be quite a hardship to move out of the townships, buy an expensive house in a white suburb, and join a club such as yours.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to change, but I think when it's on the move, it will be good. It will be the first time, it will be different and will be a little bit expensive for them, but when the time is moving, they will get some money to do that.
And that's a view shared by the top brass of Transvaal Rugby. Union President Louis Late concedes that most non-whites face economic barriers, but he says that's not deterring them from joining white clubs.
Transvaal at this point in time is open. It's completely open. We have a club here down the road, Wanderers. We have 45 black rugby players joined last week. And they could have more. And the same with Randburg, also down the road, where the Pumas, 65 of them joined 2 weeks ago. And they could be governed by a coloured president who could sit on my executive.
Surely true integration won't be achieved until there's a massive injection of money into black rugby so that they can actually compete on an equal footing with the whites.
Well, you see, you are saying something that we try to avoid, and that's black rugby and white rugby. We want to say there's one rugby. We want to say that forget about black rugby and coloured rugby and white rugby, it's one rugby. We all play together. That's what we say. And we have the facilities. So let us get together. And if we have to subsidise them to get to the fields, let us subsidise them.
But in the Eastern Cape, the home of non-white rugby, such sentiments are received cautiously. The reality in cities like Port Elizabeth and East London is that huge economic barriers will have to be broken before white and black compete on even terms on the rugby field. At the top end of the black economic scale are a handful of rugby players like Luvuo Mbane of Port Elizabeth. Outwardly a successful man, he drives a smart motor car and is studying at university for a commerce degree. His family owns several shops, including this liquor store which Luvuo manages. Monthly turnover is almost $1 million. When he's not working or studying, he plays rugby, but the facilities at his local ground are virtually non-existent, unlike most white clubs in the area.
They've got floodlights where if it tends to be dark, they have to turn on the lights. They've got all this equipment to train. The scrum machines don't have that. You see, scrum against each other, you know, and it gets quick, it gets dark. You know, we can't do everything within 30 minutes. So as you can see, it's very disadvantageous to us.
You have no equipment, no training equipment?
No, we've got nothing. We've got nothing. We can't afford to get it. We don't have sponsors. And where we can be able to give us this money, where you can build places of equipment to train, you know.
Get down, subs. Control, move.
Luvua Mbane is the captain of his team, a team which is affiliated to the South African Rugby Union. This means it never plays against the predominantly white teams fielded by the South African Rugby Board. But the merger of the two organisations will change this. It's a move that Luvua Mbane welcomes, but he's not sure that it should be the catalyst for an All Black tour next year.
No. It's too early for us. I don't think they should come. There are a lot of issues that have to be addressed here at home first. It's too early for it. It won't be a benefit to us.
Others have reservations too, including the head of the sporting arm of the African National Congress, Mululeki George.
The question of All Blacks coming to South Africa or not coming to South Africa is a very tricky question, especially at this moment in time. It would be in the interest of all South Africans if we could be allowed to sort out our problems first. Get these bodies united. Then once they are united, then we can say All Blacks, Australia, Britain, any country come. But when we are talking about integrated rugby, we want something that is going to last. It's going to be useless. It will be laughing stock of the world. If we're going to unite and have New Zealand here or All Blacks here next year, then the following year the whole thing falls apart. Then we don't know where we are and the whole world is just in a mess.
And that was a familiar message as we travelled around the windswept Eastern Cape. Almost as familiar as the bleak rugby fields we encountered in every town and village. There's no such thing as a level playing field in this corner of South Africa. "600 kilometres east of Cape Town lies the heartland of black rugby. The Eastern Cape, where we were told 100,000 players are affiliated to the South African Rugby Union. They play the game in townships like Motherwell, one of 8 such communities that surround Port Elizabeth. Motherwell's population is 108,000 and growing. The town has 5 rugby clubs, and they all share this one ground with soccer, cricket and athletics. The ground itself is owned by the town council. The changing rooms, built only 2 years ago, have already been vandalised. Not a sign that people here don't care about rugby, but a reflection that 60% of them are out of work and seek outlets for their frustration.
What's more, few are welfare beneficiaries. Dole payments for people here stop when they've been out of work for more than 6 months. Given this rather bleak situation, perhaps it's not surprising that one of the largest buildings in Motherwell is the Happy Day liquor store.
And like many of its kind, it's a drive-in store, except many of the customers we saw didn't have cars. It's a grim picture, row after row of third world housing. Makeshift shops provide some bare necessities for the locals. And every now and again there's what passes for a pub. People turn their hands to all sorts of things to eke out a living around here. Despite everything, the youngsters still make the best of it, even if they're not well catered for. Schools in Motherwell are in short supply. More are being constructed, but for the moment existing establishments run 2 shifts. Children on the morning shift attend classes from 8 till noon. Their places are then taken by pupils on the afternoon shift, which runs till 5. It leaves plenty of time for rugby, a game that nearly every school here seems to play. These boys are playing at the Zondolelo Secondary School, which, with others in the Port Elizabeth area, is the cradle of non-white rugby in South Africa.
And this is the headquarters of the Port Elizabeth Rugby Union, a fairly modest grandstand built with a grant from the Ford Motor Company, and 6 playing fields of rather differing quality. And it's on those fields they play for the Latuli Trophy, their equivalent of New Zealand's Ranfurly Shield.
There are no ground staff here, just a caretaker who lives next door to the grandstand. There's not even a cold shower. The Port Elizabeth Rugby Union looks after 42 clubs in the Eastern Province. We were told none of them have changing rooms. And this is the boardroom from which the union conducts its business. Money for essentials such as scrum machines is hard to find.
At least for this year, for us to survive, we are looking for about 60,000, 70,000 rand for the union.
Just how much money has the Port Elizabeth Rugby Union got in the bank?
We just got over 2,000 now, 2,000 rand.
Lack of money is not the only problem facing the union. It's also running out of playing fields. Squatter camps like this one at KwaZulu are encroaching onto sports grounds, threatening to swallow them up. We were told that in the Port Elizabeth area alone, 120,000 people live in camps like this. Ironically, the camps are the products of the new South Africa. With non-whites now free to live where they wish, they're leaving the depressed homelands. And they've come in their droves to cities like Port Elizabeth in search of work. Work which is not there. Work which was largely strangled by sanctions that bit deeply into the South African economy and punished the people they were supposed to help. All of which are problems that Max Mamase, president of the Port Elizabeth Rugby Union, can do without. He sympathises with the shantytown dwellers, having been one himself. But his immediate concern is rugby and redressing the imbalance between non-white and white players.
What we would like to see perhaps tomorrow is the redress of the imbalances in South Africa, particularly our playing facilities, so that we can have the same scrumming machines that the white players are enjoying. We can have the same training facilities that they are enjoying. Once that happens, then we'll put our rugby in a road to international competition. It means, on the one hand, yes, that there's going to be a lot of money pumped into it. As much as players and administrators, for the first time, we will come together as people of South Africa.
Where's that money going to come from?
Perhaps the international community can address that issue as well. And then we must try and see whether resources in South Africa cannot provide that money. By that I mean big business, sponsoring, for instance, some of our games, improving some of our facilities, perhaps the Independent Trust Fund, which is meant for the development of the whole South African society.
How long is it going to take, how many years will it take for black rugby to catch up with white rugby?
Well, it is my firm belief that it's going to take 8 to 10 years.
As long as that?
Yes.
There is another side to the story of black rugby in South Africa, and we saw it in cities like Cape Town, or more specifically, some of the adjacent black townships. Townships whose sports grounds usually double for soccer and rugby. Many are little more than patches of sand littered with stones and rubbish. Now, many have been transformed by Danny Craven's South African Rugby Board, like this one near Nyanga Township. Just over $250,000 was spent upgrading it. It's all part of a policy going back 8 years. a policy which has resulted in about $5 million being outlaid on sports fields all over the country. We were told the board has stipulated that they must be open to people of all races.
I think we've got about more than 75 fields we've already addressed like this and developed.
These are essentially for black and coloured communities?
That's right. Those are the less privileged areas we address first. The whites have got to come and play here, and we play on their facilities too.
But to what extent do the coloured people here play with or against the whites?
Well, they play in the fixtures, in the local fixtures. This club, the particular club in this area, play in the Western Province Rugby Union of Jan Pickard.
19-year-old halfback Lewis Mzomba, a non-white youth we came across who's been helped by the South African Rugby Board. Some would call it tokenism, others affirmative action. Whatever the case, his rugby career has never looked back since attending a rugby board coaching clinic 4 years ago. Along with 7 other young non-whites, he made the South African Schoolboy 15, a fully integrated team that's the cream of schoolboy rugby. All this while living in Nyanga Township in Cape Town. Not exactly squatter territory, but tough nonetheless. Serious crime is endemic round here. Lewis's rugby prowess has also helped him win a rugby board bursary to Teachers Training College. It's worth about $1,500 a year. This year, 10 were awarded to boys from the townships.
Do you think that the board has done enough to encourage black people like yourself to play rugby?
Yes, I'm sure it has done a lot through the schools level, because their rugby is concentrated on the school level. Like they introduce project weeks that gives opportunity to explore our skills.
What do you say to people in countries like New Zealand who say the All Blacks shouldn't come here to South Africa until apartheid is completely dismantled?
Things are coming right, and this is a high time they should come. But New Zealand is a very strong side indeed, but it's going to be tough for them.
It's not only rugby players who've benefited from the actions of the South African Rugby Board. New grounds are being shared with sports such as athletics. Raising the money for such amenities has not been easy, and now it's getting harder.
Unfortunately, our money is drying up. We find it difficult to find sponsors because of the curtail, outside world's curtail on industry and sanctions. We find it difficult to find money from sponsors. Also, we're not getting tours so to generate our own money. If we had tours, major tours, we could generate funds, and these funds will all be plowed back into the deficiencies and the shortcomings of the facilities.
The man who's guiding the South African Rugby Board down the road to integration is Dr. Dani Craven, 80 years old and president for 35 of them. He says he's fully committed to amalgamation.
Will blacks and colours have an equal say in the running of this new rugby body?
As they had with us, yes. They had with us full say. Nothing less than what the whites had.
But there was a feeling, though, that the whites had the casting vote, if you like, that they had the ultimate control.
Rubbish, man. Don't talk to me about rubbish. Let's talk sense.
So they'll have a complete, fair say in the running and the administration?
Everything. There is nothing that you do with your Maoris that we don't do with them. Nothing. Actually, we give them a greater representation than you do in New Zealand.
What are the chances of a black person or a coloured person being elected president of this new board?
Easy. The best man must go. As long as it's done on merit and not as a token.
Would you be prepared to serve under a black or a coloured president?
Oh, yes, of course. Why not? If he is the right leader, yes.
But you've been in this position now for 35 years?
I don't know.
A long time?
A long time.
It must be hard for you, in fact, to give up the reins of power, perhaps.
No, the moment we're back in World Rugby, I retire. Then I've completed my task. That's all I'm living for and working for, to get back South Africa back into World Rugby.
So before the year's out, one fully integrated body should control rugby in this country, paving the way for mixed teams to play in stadiums like this one here at Ellis Park in Johannesburg. South Africans also hope it will open the door to an All Black tour in 1992, and more importantly, allow them to stage the very lucrative World Cup in 1995. But before any of this can happen, there's going to be some very hard bargaining. The man calling the shots is former rugby player Steve Wetere. Until recently, Wetere was in exile, in hiding, a member of the banned African National Congress. Now he's chairing the steering committee set up to amalgamate the South African Rugby Board and the South African Rugby Union. Will you be insisting that at least half the seats on the executive of the new body go to black rugby officials?
That has not been discussed, but it would be very much proper if there is a visible presence, very visible, sizable presence of black people in the new body as executive.
So provided this new body, this new amalgamated body is up and running and functioning before the end of the year, you think the All Blacks will come?
The prospects are quite bright for them to come.
How bright?
Very bright.
You have no other conditions that would have to be met before the All Blacks came here?
There has to be unity in rugby. There has to be unity in rugby along non-racial lines.
Some people within the ANC we've spoken to say the All Blacks should not come until the whole issue of one person, one vote is sorted out.
No, that's out. I don't think they're expressing the position of the African National Congress in that regard. We are saying, for instance, to the international, that's what we have been saying all along the line, that you must isolate, boycott apartheid sport, support, consolidate, strengthen, and assist whatever way possible the non-racial sport, the non-racial culture that is beginning to emerge in South Africa.
Ultimately, though, it's the grassroots of South African rugby which could make or break the integration process. Gathered here are officials of the white and non-white border rugby unions in the Eastern Cape. They must hammer out a formula for sharing power, potentially an explosive issue for Ronnie Grobler, president of the White Border Union, and Mululeki George, president of the non-white Border Union. Grobler's union controls 20 clubs in the region, while George controls 120. Amalgamation means Grobler's power base could be at stake.
We are rugby players at heart, and I think that if we got it together on that basis, and that if we go into it with that in mind, that nobody's going to be prejudiced and rugby is going to win. So I don't feel threatened at all.
We detected that last night, that they seem to be fearing the question of numbers, which, like I said, we were there when I said that. In South Africa, it's very difficult because the ratio is too big. So it's, whilst we don't encourage domination, but surely because of the numbers of our people, we are going to be have greater numbers than them.
Lean forward. Right.
So if South African rugby is to progress beyond mixed coaching clinics like this one, white and non-white administrators must reach agreement on sharing power. And that's something which the country's politicians must also resolve if apartheid is to be laid to rest. For the moment, the fate of the new South Africa relies on giving non-whites the vote and removing generations of entrenched racist thinking. This won't be easy. Consider what happened recently, not 3 kilometres from where these pictures were taken. A group of white youths from an exclusive boarding school battered a 70-year-old black man to death. The boys, who belonged to a so-called Kaffir-bashing society, dumped his body near the school's cricket nets. And here's the rub. Their 19-year-old leader was only sentenced to 2 years jail for the murder, while on the same day an 18-year-old youth from Soweto was sentenced to 8 years jail for stealing a car. So while apartheid may have almost disappeared from the statute books, it continues to live on in the courts. And then there's the question of voting. Blacks, who make up 80% of the population, have never had the vote. Now their patience has run out.
We don't want to wait. We want it now. That is why we've embarked on action. We've designated 1991 as a year of mass action for the transfer of power from the hands of the white minority clique into the hands of all South Africans. It's mass action in 1991, and we wanted to vote. Right now, as I'm talking to you, I want to vote now.
So it's into this cauldron that the All Blacks will step if they tour South Africa next year. They will find a country painfully trying to erase years of legalised discrimination. The process is not yet irreversible, but many South Africans, white and non-white, are determined to put the past behind them and carve out a future together.
We don't want anything, that reminds us of the evils of apartheid in a new South Africa.
That report from Rod Vaughan and Carol Hirschfeld in South Africa. Well, just a few hours ago, it was announced that the white-dominated South African Rugby Board and the non-white South African Rugby Union have agreed on a joint constitution for an integrated rugby football union. Well, as we've seen, there are major changes taking place in South African sport to the point where even prominent blacks are keen to see the resumption of sporting contacts. So, where does all this leave us? Joining me now in our Auckland studio is John Minto, the International Secretary of HART, the Halt All Races Tours organisation. And in our Wellington studio we have Eddie Tonks, the Chairman of the New Zealand Rugby Football Union. Mr Tonks, first of all, on the face of it, there would appear to be powerful arguments for the sporting isolation of South Africa to be discontinued. And there is, of course, a tour of South Africa by the All Blacks scheduled for next year. Is it your expectation that this tour will take place?
Well, we genuinely feel that it should take place, but of course it depends on the movement from now on. I'm delighted to hear the news tonight from your remarks, and I think that's a great step forward in a very, very short time. And if that progress continues, I can see no other reason that we shouldn't appear in South Africa in 1992. What would it take, actually, to satisfy you that that progress had taken place? Well, the same criteria Steve Sweaty outlined tonight, and that is the New Zealand Rugby Union stance, that there should only be one body administrating a fully integrated rugby, and that's our criteria. We've made it clear to the South African Rugby Board already that that is our standard, and we hope to see it through. And yet there is a body of opinion that says even when that board is in place, a tour would be premature because it's going to take a long time for genuine integration to occur. That wouldn't deter you? I don't think so. I think someone has got to start somewhere, and I think we've got to offer every positive movement to encourage them to speed things up. And as far as I'm concerned, if that one body is there, the fact that we tour will probably give them some income that they could develop the game even faster. Well, John Minto, what do you make of all of this?
Well, I think there's still quite a long way to go just on the question of sport. There are mixed opinions in South Africa at the moment as to when the sports boycott should be lifted. And as far as we're concerned here, through 22 years now, we've taken our lead from the non-racial sports movement, and that is represented now by the National Olympic and Sports Congress. And when they say the boycott is over, then the boycott is over. But I think from New Zealand's point of view now, I don't think it's our role to be interfering at all in the process that's going on there and putting pressure on for tours to take place next year or whenever. I think our role is to sit back and allow that process to occur. Too often in the past, New Zealand's been involved to the detriment of black South Africans. Are you afraid that it might be premature? Well, yes, it could easily be premature. I think the second half of this year is going to be the crucial time when the constitutional negotiations begin. And at the moment, the white regime around the world are lobbying very hard in favour of a racist constitution, basically a lower house elected on a one-person, one vote, where blacks would clearly be the majority, but an upper house which would be controlled by whites and elected either on a geographical basis or on a language basis, or on some basis which would give a majority control to whites. And that upper house would have the power of veto over legislation coming from the lower house. So
if that happened, would you treat that as a ground for resisting a tour?
Oh, very much so. I think we've come 20% of the way.
But that's not sporting apartheid.
Well, no, it's not. But I think the sporting isolation of South Africa has been a very powerful weapon to bring political change in the country, and the changes that we've seen, both political and in sporting area, have come about not only through the pressure of a sports boycott, but I think that's been a major factor.
Mr Tonks, will you personally visit South Africa to satisfy yourself that genuine integration is occurring, to look at the facilities and training programs that are in place?
I think that could be a possibility later on. At this given time, I haven't given any consideration to that.
It's clear, though, that a lot of catching up is to be done, isn't it? Shouldn't you be there to ensure that there are moves along those lines?
I think it would be unfair to expect everything to happen in the first 12 months. I do believe that, as we've seen tonight on the screen, that there's been tremendous improvement over the last 4 to 5 years, and it's gaining momentum. I know there's the haves and the have-nots. I fully recognise that. But that's something that's got to be dealt with over the next 4 or 5 years. And I don't believe it's going to happen in the next 12 months or 2 years.
What can New Zealand do? What can the New Zealand Rugby Union do to improve the status of the have-nots?
Well, I think the mere fact that we, for the last few years, have stipulated quite clearly that we will not tour until there is a united body administrating rugby. And that was the first step. And I think that's played a very, very large part in the movements we've seen today. The second thing is that if we tour, and when we tour, I believe it's going to further help the both races get fully together, because we'll be playing both black, white, colours, or whatever you like. There'll be one united body, so that'll be South African Rugby Football Union.
John Minto, what about the trade and financial sanctions that are still in place? We heard black people there say that they have been counterproductive. They've stopped money going into the revamping of facilities. Is it time to abandon those as well?
Well, it's always been recognised by black people that financial sanctions would affect them most, because they are on the bottom of the socio-economic heap in South Africa. But they have said repeatedly through the leadership of organisations across the board and through public opinion polls that it's a sacrifice that they've been prepared to make if it brings a quicker end to apartheid. And I think the changes we're seeing in the last 18 months in South Africa have been brought about largely through that international pressure, through the pressure of boycotts, financial as well as other boycotts.
Eddie Tonks, time to give some credit here where it's due, I think. Would you say that it's due to people like John Minto, the John Mintos of this world, that we're able to have this discussion tonight and observe the progress that has taken place in South Africa?
I dare say that that's played quite a significant part. But I think we get to a point, though, Lindsay, where enough's enough. And I think we've got to be careful now that we don't start moving against having this policy continue where they think, well, what's the use of it all? I think we've all got to be positive now and encourage them to act as quickly as possible.
What are the chances of this tour going ahead next year? Better than 50-50, would you say?
I would say they're better than 50-50 as we sit here right now.
One other pointer that emerged from Rod Vaughan's program was that during the period of isolation, the game has become very professional. People get paid a lot of money now to play rugby in South Africa. That's going to be a bit of an embarrassment, isn't it, when they are brought back into the fold?
It could well be, particularly in the light of the amateur regulations as they now stand, and I think it's going to pose a few questions for someone to answer.
And the other point is, are we good enough for the Springboks?
Well, New Zealand Rugby Union has never forsaken a challenge, and we take it upon ourselves that'll be the greatest challenge of our life for many years.
So you're confident a tour will go ahead and that South Africa will be readmitted also into the Olympic movement? You're just back from the IRB meeting today. What was the feedback on that?
From the IRB, it was positive, but the IRB also made the same stipulation that the South African Rugby Board representatives that I've made. And so the situation is quite clear in everybody's mind what their goal is and what they have to achieve. Now, to be absolutely confident about the 1992 proposed tour, I think it's premature at this point. Let's see what happens over the next 2 to 3 months, and then we'll be able to make up our mind more seriously.
John Minto, not quite time to put the placards away.
No, certainly not. We don't want to see New Zealand jump in and cause this similar kind of problems which New Zealand Rugby in particular has caused in the past. We're dead keen to see New Zealand tour South Africa, but it must be under the right conditions.
You must be gratified, though, at the progress that has taken place.
Oh, definitely, but we'll still be here until the job's completely finished.
John Minto and Eddie Tonks, thanks both very much for joining us tonight.
In 1992, the All Blacks played one test match in South Africa, defeating the Springboks 27-24. South Africa hosted and won the 1995 Rugby World Cup.
Koro Wetere was a Labour Party Member of Parliament for the Western Māori electorate for 27 years. He served as Minister of Māori Affairs for 7 years. In June 1995, Wetere spoke with One Edwards for the Marae program. The interview has been abridged.
Kia ora, I'm Hone Edwards. Welcome to Aurere. The Honourable Koro Wetere will step down at the next election after 26 years as Member of Parliament for Western Māori. In 9 consecutive elections, he took the seat for Western Māori with convincing majorities, serving the 3 great causes of his life: the King Movement, the Ratana Church and the Labour Party. He joins me shortly, but first, One Network News reporter Lee Pearson filed this report earlier this week, the day Koro Wetere announced his retirement from politics.
It was a surprise announcement.
Today, 26 years ago, I was selected as the candidate for Western Māori, and so I picked today to announce that I will retire from politics at the next general elections.
Koro Wetere came to Parliament in 1969, a junior backbencher in Norman Kirk's government. From 1984 to 1990, he was Māori Affairs Minister. His most significant achievements, getting Māori claims backdated to 1840 and a 3-fold increase in budget funding for Māori. Winston Peters' Māori loan scandal had Mr Wetere offer his resignation in 1987. It wasn't accepted. From the opposition benches, Koro Wetere continued to pursue Māori interests. He worked behind the scenes at Motua Gardens. He was instrumental in securing Tainui's $170 million settlement with the government. Insiders believe he wanted to ensure a settlement for his iwi before exiting politics. Koro Wetere turns 60 next week and is understood to be in poor health. He wants to work with his Tainui people in their post-settlement future.
The philosophy of the King Movement, the philosophy of the Ratana Church, how did you reconcile those 2 philosophies with the Labour Party and with government?
I guess...
What were the elements? Was it the treaty?
Well, I guess, first of all, I was the first to be of the Kingitanga and of the Ratana movement. I'd also become a member of the Labour Party. So those 3 movements were tied as a result of all of that. And so I had no difficulty in moving in all of those circles. The question is, of course, if you go back to the Treaty of Waitangi, we know that the late King Tawhio went about 1883 to seek resolution about these matters. The late King Iterata went in 1914. The purpose was exactly the same. He went, and then you had Wetere Ratana, went in 1924. And then you might ask, why my involvement? My mother happened to be part of that delegation. My grandfather was part of it. So I have vivid, I guess, objectives about that I was told about. And so I went to Parliament with an open mind about this matter. The question was looking for ways and means of actually bringing about that to fruition. And here we are today. The first elements were the party's moves in 1946 to establish those trust boards affecting Raupati, Tainui, Taranaki, and more latterly Ngaitarangi. And if you look at the way that was perpetrated, that was done by the party. Then came 1972-5 under Norman Kirk, the establishment of the Waitangi Tribunal. Matiu was the minister. He had our full support. And yes, we had the date to 1975. The greatest thing for me politically was to become the minister in 1984. Just want to thank Matiu for allowing me to do that. But nevertheless...
But Matiu didn't really agree at that point, though. He left because he was dissatisfied with the policies of the Labour Party and felt that they weren't going to do anything for the Māori.
But you see, at the end of the day, Hone, and I guess the political realities of political life, if you've not got the political muscle, the goodwill, and the policy, then you will flounder. We can't afford a luxury of that kind in the future. We cannot leave our people in a place of complacency and without a future. We need to become part and participants in that future, be it economically, culturally, and politically. This new system, in my view, will bring that about, and that awareness that we need as a nation to survive.
Koro, as Minister, one of the legislative changes, one of the major legislative changes that you made was in fact taking back the Māori grievance claims, dating them back from 1975, I think it was, back to 1840. Yes. And with that opened up the floodgates, and Māori had the opportunity for the first time to attempt to have their treaty grievances settled. Oh. Today, when you look back today and you see the amount of protests and land occupations culminating around the country, do you think that was a good move?
Yes, I do. And I have to say that I want to thank my colleague, the Honourable Geoffrey Palmer. In 1983, in fact, on the 3rd of February 1983, we announced the policy. The leader at the time, David Longy, was in London, I think it was. We put a phone call to him. There was myself, Bruce Gregory, I think it was, in the office at the time. We established the policy with the full consultation of council, and that we were to announce it before we went to Waitangi that year. And that was to take the date back to 1840. Geoffrey's words were very clear. He said, look, he said, if your people are going to be still dancing around and talking about this matter, why don't we do something about it? If we need to go back to that, why not? Why are we going to hide behind guilt and say that it didn't happen? Of course it did. If that's the way that we have to settle these things, then let's start the process. And that's how it happened. Mind you, I did say to Geoffrey, it will cost us, but at the end of the day, in my view, New Zealand will win.
And what the public fear out there is the notion of separate development, that this, from that legislation and other legislative changes, has really perpetuated a pathway for Māori which is separate development.
No.
What is your view on that?
No, that is not separate development. We have never had separate development in this country, and I hope we do never see that in our lifetime. What we have had has been a treaty that set out, and in those clauses which said there should be a government for this country, and all of those things that go with it. It set out its policies. We've set out legislation. True, some of them went against Māori and Māori aspirations. But it was that government, if you listen to what Queen Elizabeth had to say in 1953, and again, I guess, other times when she's come to this country, the soul of those decisions are left with the Crown and her government. That has not changed. So what have we done? We have put in place legislation, policies that enabled our people to develop. That is not separate development. We are rich because we have many cultures in this country. And all of those cultures have helped develop this nation.
So where's this notion of separate development coming from then?
Well, it certainly didn't come from me. And it certainly won't come from me in the future either. But to get behind, to use all of those cultural values to the best of our abilities so that we can all gain as a nation. The stats tell us right now, Hone, 50% of our people are half-blood. What does that mean? It means for me that we are inextricably tied to all of those cultural values. At times, I suppose you can hear my Irish ancestry coming to its fore, whether that's an angle or something of that kind. Others you will hear Scottish ancestry, others you will hear Yugoslavian, and so on. Those people brought the wine industry to this country. Every industry that came to this country was developed by a culture that came here. We owe a debt of gratitude to those people. However, we must maintain our identity, and the way forward, in my view, has been set by our ancestors, and you can go back before 1840, and in my view, that agenda was set, and it is up to us as descendants of those people to carry on and carry the torch and flame for our nation and for our people.
Now, when you were Minister, you almost gave that away during the Māori Loans affair. You handed in your resignation to the Prime Minister of the time. It could have changed your professional career and may have been, I'm sure it was certainly taxing. How taxing was it on your personal life? Did it hurt?
No, of course not. You know, the funny thing about that, it didn't happen.
The loans affair didn't happen at the end of the day?
Yes. It just didn't happen. I guess the media got a feast out of that, and they dined out for many, many months.
It didn't hurt you
certainly
personally?
Not. It just challenged me to be a lot stronger to carry forward and develop all of those policies that we put in place.
Did it have, what was the impact on your family? This is the actual taxing of a politician's life on his wife and on his family is a side of politicians we don't see. How was it for your family?
Well, I'd have to say, Hone, that yes, it was taxing for the family. But that aside, without the support of my family, but particularly my wife, which I've always said that she represents 80% of the job, quite frankly. I mean, in 1969, we had a family from 6 months to 9 years. He had a farm in the middle of that, and then tried to hew out another life. And so she was left to carry on doing those tasks on my behalf, while I was everywhere else but at home.
Did you ever feel that you missed out on your role as a dad?
I think fortunately I had a very understanding family, and the great thing today is to have live in mokopunas, I suppose, and to now see them running around and to be part of them. Now I guess that part of my history, my political future, will one day see the reasons why I wanted to resign. They were not with respect to the loans fair, I can assure you that.
What was the reason? Why did you decide here, 26 years later, to hand in your resignation or to retire?
26 years later, because I believe I had achieved the ultimate objectives which I set out to do. Tried in policy, and then, of course, came the Tainui thing.
The Tainui settlement.
Tainui settlement, which was tied in to these three movements. I never at any time divorced the movements from that package.
And in the future, what do we have? What do you have in store in the future, Koro? Your favourites are the media reporting golf and rugby league, that you're going to be spending most of your time in the future now playing golf. Will that be true, or are you going to carry on and utilise the skills that you've picked up in Parliament in another field?
Well, I'd be telling stories out of court if I wasn't to agree with you, because that's what's going to happen. They will have a priority.
Lots of golf.
Absolutely. My neighbour said to me the other morning, Waitomo Golf Club, here I come.
The paper's also said opera. Is that a favourite of yours?
That's another, and I have to say we're about to go to Australia shortly, one of my parliamentary colleagues and I, and have a look at that. It may be this is how I might get leave, Hone, to go and do that. But it is a favourite of mine. And
who's your
favourite? My colleagues.
Who's your favourite operatic singer?
Luciano Pavarotti.
Pavarotti.
Absolutely. First class.
Now, just briefly before we end, Koro, the political landscape in the future for Māori under MMP, where do you see that sitting, Māori political leadership in the future?
I think the road ahead for us is a bright future, quite frankly. I'm enthused by the numbers of people who want to seek the nomination for Western Māori. I say to all of those people, good luck. Be in there with the nomination before the 30th of June, and whoever is that successful candidate will have my full support for the next 18 months or before we get to our next election.
What do they?
I give you that undertaking.
What do they have to watch? Just before we finish off, what would your warning be, or your words of advice be to the incoming replacement for Western Māori?
Oh, I think it would be wrong to predict anything like that. The fact is, the road is wide open. The seat is purely Tainui, as I understand it. What more do you want? And secondly, that person will be charged with the responsibility of looking after the affairs of our people. We have now an agenda which will establish our people into the future. We will need that parliamentary advice. We will need that parliamentary guidance. I have every confidence in our young people and the future in which they will add to the thrust that is now being applied by the Tainui Trust Board, by the Hauraki Māori Trust Board, by the Ngāti Raukawa Trust Board, and indeed, my own people, the Manipura Māori Trust Board. But all of those authorities within the tribal area are now being asked to re-examine their methods of accountability, of administration, but more than that, the objectives to the future, to be able to build a strong relationship between our people and the Crown. And under the guidance of the leadership of our people, particularly our reki, we will get there.
Koro, congratulations for your 26 years in Parliament. I've enjoyed every interview that I've had with you, and best of luck for the future.
It's been a delight to be here, and I want to thank all of you. Kia ora.
That interview with Koro Wetere was broadcast on the 18th of June 1995.
For some contemporary insights into the workings of Parliament, you can view a collection of short videos from the Spotlight on Parliament series. Just head to the New Zealand Parliament website at www.parliament.nz.